Hey guys, before we start, a quick shout out to Alpha Dog Nutrition for sponsoring this podcast. Alpha Dog products are now available at dusupply.com, and you can use code ALPHADOG15 at checkout for 15% off and a credit for free shipping to try it yourself. Now let's get you to your podcast.
Where's Fielder? He's gone to the dogs.
Dogs Podcast. Welcome in. Come on in. Take a seat. Make yourself comfortable. Pour yourself a beverage and be prepared to be entertained by some of the finest dog talk on the World Wide Web right here. The Gone to the Dogs Podcast. Dog talk at its finest. Fresh back from Autumn Oaks, had a great time at Autumn Oaks this year and picked up several recordings for sharing with you in today and in the weeks to come. We had a good time at Autumn Oaks. I want to especially thank Jason Doobie and Ben Sheets for arranging a media house in town, an Airbnb that we enjoyed tremendously and got an opportunity to spend some time with some of the people that do media. I was also privileged to sit down and record with Josh Michaelis with his Cane Stream Media podcast, and I always enjoy seeing Josh, and just had a really good time this year. Autumn Oaks was a little warmer than usual. The Friday temperatures were pretty brutal, and actually the hottest that I remember in all my years of being associated with Autumn Oaks. Friday night had some high winds and flipped some tents and some canopies and all that, but then that provided a little cooler temperatures for Saturday. They had a little drizzling rain here and there. But anyway, I tried to get around and see as many people as I could, and I'm not going to try to name everybody because I can't, and then I would make somebody mad or disappointed in me, I would say. But did have so many good conversations and opportunities to meet some great people. And anyway, for this podcast, I'm going to share with you a couple of recorded visits that I had. The first will be with my longtime Texas buddy, former field rep, Walker Dog Authority, bench show par excellence. You'll hear him mention in bench show judge, I should say, and you'll hear him mention in this interview that he was the last judge to judge the entire Autumn Oaks show all by himself. So we have a really good visit with Sid Underwood. And then secondly, a fellow that I hadn't seen in 35 years. In fact, when he walked up, he said, do you remember me? And I had to be truthful and say, no, I don't remember you. But when he gave me his name, I immediately recalled. And that's Doug Crawley from the great state of Illinois. Doug has the distinction of owning the very first female UKC World Champion. And so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that hunt back in 1989 when Doug won all the marbles, so to speak. So I hope that you enjoy it. We're going to have a lengthy show here. I'd say about 85 or 90, about an hour and a half today. So sit back, relax for some dog talk at its finest at Autumn Oaks. Well, welcome to the Gone to the Dogs podcast here in the headquarters building of the 2024 Autumn Oaks. Now, I was going to tell you what number autumn oaks this is, and I'll leave that up to you. You can do the math. It started in 1960. How many? My guest here with me is a long-time friend. Has emphasis on the long, because we're all a little long in the tooth here. But Sid Underwood from the great state of Texas is here with me. How you doing, Sid?
I'm doing fine, Steve. Thank you.
Yeah, man, it's good to see you. Good to run into you here. And caught up with you here on Saturday. I think you're going to be heading back to Texas here pretty soon.
That's correct, this afternoon.
That's the plan. Well, when you live in the great state of Texas, you can't stay away from home long. It kind of draws you back, don't it?
No, it does call you back. For us, it's the second homeland. We have two homelands.
Yeah. Okay, well, I always enjoyed my trips to Texas. They began for me really back in '83 when I went to work at UKC and got to go to the Texas State Hunt the first year in Fairfield in September. Sweated buckets, but I had a wonderful, wonderful time. And you and I visited before on the podcast, Sid, and we talked about those days and reminisced and all of that stuff. But back when I was talking about the number, let's see, from 1960, and this is 24. That's about 64 years,
yep.
Isn't it? So that's quite a long time. Sitting here in the headquarters building, which is commonly called the Kuhlman Center, where we used to do everything here at Autumn Oaks. We used to they still call the cast out in this room, but it used to be the kitchen area where all the tables where all the coon hunters gathered together. One of the highlights of Autumn Oaks for me for so many years was that pork chop sandwich that you could get right around the corner here. But they've since changed all that, and the food's out in the midway out there with the food trailers and stuff. But how far did you drive up here from Texas?
From my drive, I looked on the phone map device, and from my driveway to Richmond's 981 miles.
That's a fur piece, as we'd say back home. Yeah. Well, you've certainly traveled quite a few miles with these coon hunts, as have I. And we were talking over in the show barn just earlier this morning about that you, in your bench showing activities over the years, were the last guy to judge the entire show at Autumn Oaks, right?
That's correct. 1989 in Oak Harbor, Ohio, as we discussed, and 189 dogs over 2 days.
Yeah, that was a lot of dogs on the bench. Now, the bench shows have grown. I'll use that big word, exponentially.
Yes.
Which means a whole bunch.
That's right.
But the night hunts, the history of Autumn Oaks, way back in the day, they started on Thursday night.
Right.
It was a 3-night deal. But I always remember those Sunday bench shows. Everybody else had packed up and got their awards for the night hunt, gone home, but we still had a big old bench show on Sunday with the pairs and the grand champions, I believe. But you judged the whole shebang that year.
I did the whole thing, and that was the last year. It was just getting so big that it just made sense to go to a 2-ring setup.
Yeah,
kind of like Westminster. I've only seen that on television. But the same principle, you got at least 2 rings, maybe more.
Well, we were over this morning there watching some of the show, and they had the 2 rings operating, and I know it. And we were watching Walker males and English. I don't know whether they're males or females, but yeah. So they run them through here. They start now with a confirmation show on Thursday. And I think it's Thursday. Maybe they start on Wednesday. I don't know. It starts.
I think it's Thursday. I believe the confirmation show's on Thursday.
Yeah. It's funny. A lot of my coon hunting friends have shown for years, like Lee Kearns. He calls it a ground show. Yeah.
Well, that's a pretty accurate description.
Yeah. I said, well, you're one of them leading feed guys now anyway, aren't you? It does my heart good to see Lee out there showing his dog. He's well into his 80s, about 85, I believe, and it's a little bit of a chore for him to gate a dog around the ring. Well, I got somebody moving the chair behind us. We are in the Kuhlman Center here, and people are filtering in from outside. Today's a little cooler than what we had yesterday. You had Texas weather.
Yeah, we did the first 2 days. Definitely was Texas weather.
Well, you're up here with your buddy Tom Froese, right?
Well, yes.
He's from Oklahoma.
He's from Pawnee County, Oklahoma, which is north central Oklahoma. It's north west of Tulsa.
Yeah, I've had the privilege, over the years to travel around Oklahoma. I haven't really been out in the Panhandle out there in western part. I've been close. I've been to Lubbock, Texas, and I had a cousin that was in the Air Force in Wichita Falls. He married a girl from Muleshoe, Texas. Mm-hmm. And his great gal, Sharon, love her to death. She's been a great cousin-in-law, I guess you'd call it. But, the Oklahoma, you mentioned a name of a town earlier, Ada.
Right.
Ada, America. They had a billboard out there that said this is Ada, America.
Uh-huh.
And they had a real good Western store. And it started with an N. And that sucker got my money every time I went to Oklahoma. I was buying a hat or a belt or a pair of boots. I always loved that Western wear stuff. You never were real big into the Western wear much.
No, I really, it's being a native Texan and grew up in a rural part of southwestern Dallas County. I had a rural upbringing, and I did wear boots some. And my younger days, for a while, I wore a cowboy hat a little bit.
Did you?
But you're right. For the vast majority of my life, I'm not into that total cowboy look. Yeah.
Well, it got popular back there, when the mechanical bulls came about and all that stuff. And there's a long way. It's a long way from a mechanical bull to get one on them old ranks, like Lane Frost used to ride. Yeah. Was Lane from Texas or Oklahoma?
I think he's from Oklahoma.
Oklahoma, yeah, right. Well, everything reminds me of something else, but it's been real refreshing this weekend, as it always is for some of these guys, and some of them are younger guys say, I like the stories. And that's the thing. I'm working with a production company here this weekend a little bit, laying down some ideas of doing a little more visual work just to talk about the podcast and why we do this podcast and why we think it's important to do it. I think a lot of people would say, Fielder, you just need to go back to Florida and, find you a nice seat on the shuffleboard court and, and say, we had a great time. But I can't do it. I still love getting out here around and being around the hounds and the people and see people walk up here today. At my age, I have to a lot of times I have to stop and look at somebody. And I say, I know that guy, I know him, but what is his name? And then it's kind of like a chip cog on a flywheel or something. It'll just spin, and then there it is. Randall Winchester was just up. Jerry Harmon from Virginia, a guy that was very competitive hunting English dogs back in my UKC days, and the different ones, so I'm not quite ready to give all that up yet. But are you keeping your hand in a little bit?
Yeah, we talked about Tom Froese. I met him, or I guess he knew me when he was a youngster. And he'd seen me at Ada in the Texas State hunt. But the honest answer is I had we got apart, and I really didn't know him. He had to remind me that we had met way before. And that was at the ACHA World Hunt in Stillwater, Oklahoma in 2017.
Okay.
And of course he lives close to there, and he was there at that hunt. And I was the master of hounds for it. And anyway, we reacquainted, I guess you could say. And from there, we've, it's kind of been nice for me because he's a great deal younger and still very active in the hunts and stuff. So it allows me to kind of vicariously stay in it. And but I mean, I still pleasure hunt all the time, because the competition hunts, not so much.
Well, it's great that you do that, because I've kind of got myself in a fix as far as coon hunting goes. By living in Florida, it's absolutely horrendous to try to summer hunt in Florida. But wintertime can be pretty good. So that's kind of, if I hunt down there, it's going to be pretty much wintertime stuff. But like you know, I have a younger fella. He's in his 50s now, Mark Miller, in Taylorsville, North Carolina, and he and I partnered on a pup, and that's turned out really well. And so I kind of keep, I was showing somebody earlier today this Garmin LTE unit that works through your cell phone. So anywhere you got cell service, you can track a dog, and I can sit at home 600 miles away and watch him. He'll text me. He said, "Well, get your boots on. I'm getting ready to go." and so, it's amazing what technology's done. And my buddy Randy Smith when I can get him out of Canada, he and his boy just got back from another big northern pike fishing trip.
Right.
He caught for that lake and that outfitter up there. He caught a record. And, of course, nowadays, they take pictures of your fish and they build a model of it. They don't actually kill the fish.
Right.
53 inches long.
Oh,
now, that's a long fish.
Yes.
But anyway, he keeps me in the game, too. He'll probably video me or send me videos 4 or 5 times a week of hunting. And, of course, it's ridiculous. He's got so many nice walker females, and that's his game, He loves the females, and he's really gotten into raising puppies scientific way. He's got an incubator and all this. It's over the top. But anyway, guys like that help me to stay involved,
Yes.
But, okay, you got a dog. You told me you got a little female now, I believe.
I've got, as Tom Froze and I are half interest on like 4 females.
Oh, good deal.
Ranging from one that's 10 plus to now I've got one at home that won't be 6 months old till October 19th.
No, she'll be just right this fall.
She will be, and she... Tom had never. My favorite all-time coon dog was Fish Creek Streaks, an open-spotted female I had back in the 70s and 80s. Well, Tom had a recent litter, and he'd only seen Streaks on photograph. Of course, he never saw her in person. But he said, "I've got," and I never thought I dreamed I would ever name another dog Streaks. But when I saw this pup, I said, It's got to be. And so now I have Streaks again, if you will.
All right. That's great. Yeah. That's great.
And I told him if she's half as good as her namesake, we'll be delighted.
Well, that's it. When you have a good one, you don't forget them, for sure. And we tend to be always looking for something better, but I think the older I get, I would be real satisfied to have some of the dogs that I had back years ago,
I don't think, you and I have discussed this before. I think there's a higher percentage of good dogs in the era we're currently in. Having said that, I don't think the great dogs of today are any greater than the great dogs of the past.
I agree. They may be a little different in style and so forth.
Yes.
This week, Monday, we're recording here on Saturday at Autumn Oaks. and this will air. It'll be not Labor Day, but the following Monday. I recorded with Glenn Young of Noble, Arkansas, and that will be airing starting Labor Day Monday. And Glenn is 89, and he's still hunting and Walker dogs. Although I did get him to admit that his favorite breed is black and tan.
Yeah.
And he used to hunt with Tam Young years ago and all.
Yeah.
But he's been predominantly a Walker dog man, and he's hunted, with a lot of the dogs that are the icons in the Walker breed.
Yes.
House's Chief, Merchant's Banjo 2. He hunted with Harold Trusty with his dogs. He hunted with what's the other fella in Arkansas?
Well, Buddy Gilbert.
Gilbert, exactly who I was thinking about. So so he's got a pretty good yardstick there to measure these. Said the Merchant's Banjo 2 was the best competition dog he ever went on with.
Right.
I don't think that any of the dogs of today are any better than those dogs were, and they may not be as good. But it's a different game. We've discussed this. It used to be really competitive. It was almost like a wrestling match, figuratively speaking, where you were out there, you had to get your strikes and trees and get them in a hurry. So to me, that involved a lot more handling than what the guys are faced with today. And I know that's an old drum I beat it a lot on here. But the guy's got the aid of electronic devices. He knows where his dog is. He knows how the dog's acting. He can glance at that garment and see if the dog's making donuts around that tree or is he glued tight to it. You're not supposed to call his dog based on that machine, but the information's already there,
Yes.
Those old boys didn't have that.
No, and I was one of those old boys at one time, as you were too. But too, the hunts back then normally were 3 hours, and that's like a length of a football game with the commercials thrown in, of course.
Yeah.
But I would liken it to a football game because over 3 hours you can be up, you can be ahead, you could be behind or tied. Could switch. A lot could happen in a 3 hour span.
Yeah. A guy brought up something here yesterday in a conversation. We were just casually talking. And we're talking about the world situation without getting into specifics on the politics and so forth. But he said, back in the day, people had hunting and fishing, things like that. Their kids grew up in the country. But they had football. And they could play football, and it was organized, and it taught them teamwork, and it taught them how to be respectful of their teammates, and how to work together with other people, and all that. And you wouldn't think, well, football, that's what you do on Friday Night Lights, which happens to be a religion in Texas.
Yes.
But you don't think about. That was the kids today. They might be playing football, but they're doing it with their thumbs.
Yes.
In front of the TV. It's. I don't know. Buddy Brent Vaughn does a podcast on W Hunting Supply Network called "Born 100 Years Too Late."
Yeah.
And he's an old lion hunter, rides horses and mules out in Arizona and places. I feel like that sometimes, I would have liked it so much better in the days that my dad grew up, where they could just hunt anywhere in that country they wanted.
Oh, even in, I've been in it 62 years, not as long as you, but for a long time. But I remember in rural parts of Texas back then, it was almost like that then. Everybody knew what you were doing if they saw the dog box, and you could go places virtually without even asking permission and not even think about it or worry about it because everybody knew what you were doing and didn't. There's country people,
I love the stories that you've told me before about how you talked your mother into taking you down to the creek or whatever. See what? Did you know what those guys were doing?
Absolutely.
That first? Yeah, you knew.
Yeah,
because you had gone to a
family reunion in Lampasas, Texas, and the fellow Snooks Gann. I still remember his name. Snooks, obviously a nickname. But he had 2 red-bone males, Mike and Red, and they were really good dogs. And that was an epiphany for me. I already hunted as varmints and stuff. I grew up hunting as soon as I could walk and had a BB gun. I was a hunter.
Yeah.
But I just it was love at first sight.
Sure.
But I didn't know anybody, so I lived in southwestern Dallas County, and I thought hounds were some Kentucky guy on his porch. That's how I associated it. But one summer night, we had a screened-in porch where we lived, and I heard the unmistakable sound of hounds on Fish Creek, which of course, walkers, I call them Fish Creek. Yep. And so I didn't have a driver's license, but my mother, I said, please take, in this day and age, you might be worried about it, but back then we wasn't worried about anything untoward happening, She drove me down there, and I met Maurice Montgomery and Bill Smith. They were from Grand Prairie, which lived near Grand Prairie, but I was out in the country. So I met them, and that's how it all started.
Amazing story. Kind of like my dad, he'd talk about laying in bed. He and his brother slept together, his older brother, in the farmhouse there upstairs, and they could hear the hound down on the creek of the neighbor, Wash Work, trailing a coon up Piney River there. And he couldn't go to sleep for listening to that dog.
Yeah.
And it were just little guys, there.
Yeah.
So, it's an amazing thing. Well, we were talking, I wanted to, something came to mind as you were talking there earlier, and I guess it'll come back around maybe. But... doggone it, man, I had a good question for you that I was going to ask you about, but maybe it'll come back, who knows. But, what do you think? You've been around Automokes a long time, obviously. And has it changed much over the years, or does it seem like about the same?
I've certainly not been one of those every year Automokes folks, but I have been, as you said, through the years, I've been into it a number of times. I don't know that it's changed all that much, in that it's kind of like a lot of the historical hunts, the big hunts, in that it's to me it's much of a rendezvous of people, and some people, they may be too old to hunt anymore or whatever, but they still will come to something like this for the memories and the fellowship, that sort of thing. So I don't know that it's altered that much, other than just the sport of coon hunting is, it's gone to, as you already have alluded to, it's gone to town. I mean, when we were young, we didn't have tracking systems or any of that, to say the least. So the technology, just in general, and for these hunts in particular, my heavens, the batteries now on these lights are like a package of cigarettes, and they're brighter than the old wheat light batteries we had.
As I said, it looks like the landing lights on a 747 or something when they light them up.
Yeah.
And I used to say the birds start singing and everything when they crank it, baby. But, I know what I was going to ask you about, and it's kind of going back to Texas again. Mineral wells, how far were you from there?
When I grew up in Dallas County, I was probably 50 miles, and then
that far.
And then when I was at the nuclear plant in Glen Rose for 30 years and lived in Glen Rose area, Glen Rose it's about 50 miles to the south of Mineral Wells. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, when I say Mineral Wells, I think of a couple people. I knew a fellow named Wade Fikes. Did you ever meet Wade?
Yeah, I knew. I didn't know him well, but I knew Wade Fikes. Yeah.
Wade and he bought a puppy from me one time. That's how we got acquainted.
Right.
And then I flew into Lubbock one time, and he picked me up, and we drove over into New Mexico and went on a bear hunt with Gary Washburn, who Gary was a walker guy from New Mexico.
Yeah, I didn't know. I know the name, but I didn't know.
Yeah, he kind of wrote a big game column for us at Coonhound Bloodlines at one time. And he invited me out for a horseback hunt for bear and all, and it was a lot of fun. Wade with me. So I remember Wade from Mineral. Also Joe Brooks.
Joe Brooks.
Joe was started the Coon Hunters for Christ organization.
Yes.
And I think he pretty much worked all the hunts around Texas and that area. And then he got to be buddies with Larry Meeks when Larry brought PKC, and Larry just kind of went the next step with him and kind of provided some financial support, and Joe would always be at the events.
Right.
And, I'm not ashamed of my faith, but I've never wanted to get up at a coon hunt when I know these guys, they're wanting to get to the woods and they're wanting their dog to perform, and the competition urge is at a fever pitch, and they just want to get out the door.
Yes.
I was never one to deliver a sermon to them at that point. I didn't think that was the right time to do that.
No.
Well, Joe, that's what he wanted to do.
Yes.
He must have had that, as my mama said, he's got the preacher's itch. He wanted to get up there and tell them what for. We had to kind of back Joe off a little bit. I said, now, Joe, Larry, he loves you, and he's glad to have you here. You never know when a coon hunter is going to get a phone call from home. He's at 500 miles from home, and there's been a critical accident or something, and he needs somebody to counsel with him and pray with him. That's 100% what we want you to hear for. But the preaching, but he would sometimes he'd hold the church service after the cast went out.
Yeah.
He really was sincere about what he was doing.
He was, and I'm not going to get into a lot of detail, but I'll just say that Joe had a change in his life that sent him in the correct direction, if you want to put it that way. And but Joe was a good hunter. I mean, he back in the day, he was active in the clubs around Texas, and so he wasn't an amateur at the hunting at all.
Yeah. Well, I remember several people from Texas when I went to PKC. Do you ever know Gene Pritchard?
Yes.
Yeah. Gene was a guy that was always up at Aurora.
Yeah.
He was a talkative guy, a big personality type.
Yep.
I haven't heard anything from him in years. Don't really know.
Well, I can tell you, Gene is still active. There's a club at Pilot Point, Texas, which is now the Metroplex, as you know, has exploded. 8.1 million people, and it's Pilot Point's now almost. It pretty much is on the fringe of it, you might say.
Okay.
But Nick Kane and him
That's right. That name. When you said Pilot Point, I said I know somebody from there.
They have what's always been interesting to me about the Pilot Point Club is they meet at the Dairy Queen, which is, of course, Dairy Queens are everywhere now, but they were kind of originated in Texas, I think.
Okay.
But anyway, it's amusing to me that's where they meet, is at the Dairy Queen.
Oh, that brings up we could do a podcast on that about places I've gone for coon hunts. At PKC, if you drew Camden, Tennessee, you just said, oh, no. You had to go a pretty good long drive, and it was right down on the Interstate 40, and it was in a truck stop. And there was a fellow there, and I can't remember his name right now, but he was a character, and he was the host club guy, and I'll think of his name. But anyway, they've been held in some strange parts. I had one time when I was in UKC, the club was having their hunts in the same building as a beer joint.
Yeah.
It's kind of like Phil Robertson talking about I think they had a bar and something.
Yeah.
And,
Well, that's the famous Lukenbach, Texas, that Waylon Jennings had the song about. Hondo Crouch was this old guy who was the mayor of Lukenbach.
Okay.
And he told a story about they had a stripe down the middle because there was a bar on one side of it and the post office for Lukenbach was on the other side. And they didn't allow any drinking or dancing on the post office side out of respect for the flag.
Oh, man. Let's go to Lukenbach, Texas with Willie and Waylon and the boys. Great music, man.
Yeah.
I remember when they come out with all that. That was great. Loved that's a son of Texas right there, Willie Nelson.
Yeah, Willie's still with us, of course,
Yeah.
90 plus, 91, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was from Abbott, Texas. That was his home down near Hillsboro, south of the Metroplex, about 50 miles. But anyway, I mentioned Maurice Montgomery from Grand Prairie earlier. Maurice, who was, of course, coon hunted for years, but he was about Willie's age. Maurice is gone now, but he grew up in Aquila, Texas, which was only like 10 miles from Abbott. And when they were kids, they both played music early, and he knew a young Willie Nelson before Willie moved to Fort Worth.
That's probably before the guitar had the big hole in it.
Yeah, the guitar didn't have a big hole, but they call Willie, of course, his hair is like all of our hair changes, but they called him Booger Red because of his red hair.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Oh, and I remember, you look at the old films and stuff of Willie, he was all buttoned up, tie.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. For sure.
One of the funniest things I heard on TV years ago was, you remember this, who was that, was it Joan Rivers? Was there a comedian, female
Yes,
comedian?
Joan Rivers, yes.
They asked her, would she do thus and so?
Yeah.
And she said, I'd rather wear Willie Nelson's headband.
Yeah. Oh, well,
In other words, that was about the worst thing she could think of.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I love Willie, though. I used to always just under my breath when I get in that truck and start one of them 1,000-mile trips to a hunt or something. On the road again.
Well, and I know but a lot of people, if they only know what we'll call the modern day Willie Nelson, he wrote Hello Walls for Farron Young.
Great song.
He wrote some great songs for Patsy Cline and others before he got established.
Did he
himself.
write The Red-Headed Stranger?
Yeah, I think he did.
Yeah, that was a great one. I loved that one.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, we're going to miss those guys one of these days, and it's not going to be long for some of them. Merle Haggard was one of my favorites, and he's gone now, but they did that video with him and Willie and all.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, great stuff. So many great entertainers from Texas, man, besides coon hunters. Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys. Of course, who could forget George Strait? And I don't know, Buddy Holly.
Oh, Buddy Holly, Jim Reeves. Tex Ritter. I mean, the list goes on and on.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
Gene Watson, who's a famous country singer.
Well, I always liked that Western swing style music,
Yeah, Bob was the king of that. There was back in the day. There was a guy who was almost on equal footing named Milton Brown. Milton Brown and his Brownies, and Milton was from Stephenville, Texas, down southwest of Fort Worth. But he was killed in an auto accident at a very early age. So, but Bob, of course, was the ultimate.
She's gonna kill me. Melanie Hitson. What's her husband's name?
Robert.
He played in Bob Wills' band as a fiddler. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
He did.
Yes.
For sure. He was one of them twin fiddles.
Well, when I was in Glen Rose, there was a lady named Nancy Willis who had a bookstore, and her dad was Al Strickland, who was Bob's original piano player. Played
cool.
with him back in the 30s, literally.
Yeah, one of my favorite albums. When I went to Japan like all GIs over there, 2 things you got to buy when you go to Japan. You got to buy a camera.
Right.
It's either a Nikon or a Canon or a Pentax is what I like. And you got to buy a stereo set with the big speakers and the whole thing. So I bought the stereo and a camera, much to my wife's consternation. But she reminded me we used the money that she had to sell her Mustang when we went overseas. And I used it to buy stereo equipment with. But we won't go into all that.
No.
But Merle Haggard did an album called Tribute to the Best Damn Fiddle Player in the World.
Yeah.
And Bob Wills, and he tore that up, man. He was so good, and I've still got that like on on my computer and on a flash drive I play, and I love that old music.
I tell you, I went to the Merle Haggard when Bob was toward at the end. He had a tribute to him at the convention center in Fort Worth, and I went to it, and they wheeled Bob Wills out in that wheelchair. Tears literally came to my eyes.
I imagine. And what a legend.
Yeah.
And we can't forget Ernest Tubb.
Ernest Tubb from Crisp, Texas.
Crisp.
Yeah, it's a ghost town now.
I'm walking the floor over you.
Ernest Tubb and the Texas Troubadour.
There was a bus stop when I was a kid. We didn't get a car till I was like 6 years old.
Yeah.
And of course we lived in town. There was city bus service and all that. We'd drive to my grandmother's in Tennessee, no interstates at that time and all, and we'd go through a little town not far from where my brother lives called Claypool Hill, Virginia.
Yeah.
And right on the highway there was a restaurant there. I guess it might have been a beer joint too. I don't know. That's what we call them in West Virginia.
Yeah.
We don't call them taverns or
we call it a beer joint in
or
Texas.
bar.
That's maybe a southern thing.
But if you stopped there, the bus would stop for a break for everybody, and you could get as you guys say out west, get a sody.
Yeah. Well,
in Texas, that's Oklahoma.
Well,
sody.
In Texas, it's all Coke. It doesn't matter what it is. It's a Coke.
You want a Coke? What kind you want? Orange?
Yeah, this is exactly.
Yeah, it was kind of like that in West Virginia too.
Yeah.
But anyway, you could stop in there anytime, and everybody kind of laughed about it. You could hear Ernest Tubb on a jukebox.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
No, he was a classic.
Oh, history. I love it. I love the old stories. I love to reminisce about them. And, I know that era's never going to come back, but hip-hop will never do for me what that kind of music did for me.
No. It, of course, Merle had the famous song about that's the way it was in 51 when he said Hank and Lefty crowded and Lefty Frizzell, another great Texas.
He's Texan
Corsicana, from Corsicana.
Oh, yeah.
So, that's like you say, that music will never come back. I mean, we'll never be the same.
Yeah, well, that's it, for sure. And, man, you bring... I just saw Randy Riggs and who was the other guy there? I don't know. I see so many friends come by here at the booth. Folks, we're recording this live at Autumn Oaks in the headquarters building, and the bench shows are going on full blast over there. They've changed the name on that building over there. It's some kind of sponsorship on it.
Yeah,
now I don't know.
Sure.
But when we were here back in the day, we were out here in a barn, an open-sided barn, judging the show.
Yeah.
I was sharing with somebody yesterday about during the bench show, and I was sitting up there as elevated. It's kind of a stock barn or a little stock arena out there.
Yeah.
And Bruce Gill, good to see you, brother. Come back around and we'll talk. Black and tan man, Bruce Gillum from Alabama.
Yep.
Anyway, there was a yellow jacket or a hornet or something kept buzzing around my head. Buzzing. And there was this gal, and I remember she was showing a plot, and I can't remember her. I don't think she shows anymore, but she was quite active back in that day. Well, this thing was driving me nuts. It was all over. And finally it lit right there on my desk, right in front of me. Yeah. And I had a rolled, I guess a Coonhound Bloodlines or something. I went, whop! And that plot dog just launched off of that front bench. I mean, he went flying through there. Oh, man, I honestly thought she was going to come up there and whip me. I said, ooh, I am so sorry. Yeah. But the only thing I could think about was getting rid of that.
Yeah, no doubt.
That's an automotive memory you probably won't find in the archives.
No.
But... well, when you going to hit the long road here in a little bit?
Well, just a little bit. I mean, you know, I'll see. Of course, I've gained an hour heading back, so we'll
I'm going to have an unwind day tomorrow. I don't know how I'm going to handle that. I'm still find it hard to stay still in one spot, but old age is taking care of part of that. But I'm going to stay over Sunday because my flight's not back till Monday.
Oh, okay.
Man, it's ridiculous on this Allegiant airline. Yeah. I got a round trip ticket up here for $125.
Oh, my
from
land.
Tampa to Dayton.
Yeah.
And you know, it's crazy. You can't drive for that.
No
Plus,
way.
it's 2 hard days of driving. Usually what I do is drive to Birmingham to Nubbins, and that's a good 12 hours for me.
Right.
And overnight, and then he and I drive up here another 7 or 8 hours.
Yeah.
And then do turnaround. We usually leave on Saturday afternoon, drive back to his place, and then I'm on the road all day Sunday.
Yeah.
But this year I'm going to... there's a Texan right there, buddy.
Yeah.
You see that boy over there at the bench? He's got the boots. He's got the hat.
If he's not, he ought to be.
That's right. That's right. I like that old saying, you know, about that joke. Did you hear the one about the guy looks at him and says, looks at this guy and he says, why do you wear that big old hat? And he said, well, when we're out there on the range, you know, herding them cattle and stuff, keeps the sun off of us, keeps the rain off of us. I said, yeah. So well, what about that handkerchief around your neck there? He said, oh, that's a bandana.
Yeah.
I said, you would pull that up over our nose. It's like a mat. It filters out all that dust and everything. Okay. So you got leather on your legs. What's that all about? I said, oh, those are chaps. I said, but you know, when we're out there riding the range, we get in that old thick cactus and brush, mesquite, and all that stuff that keeps from tearing their legs all up. I said, okay. And he looks down at him. He said, but tennis shoes.
Yeah.
Why are you wearing tennis shoes? He said, well, I don't want somebody to think I'm a truck driver. All my truck driver listeners out there, don't send the hate mail.
Yeah, right.
It's all in fun.
Yeah.
No, but crazy stuff. But I don't want to let you go till I hear about this. What you got right now that's really making you?
Well, we've got there again. I'm half interested on all these dogs with Tom Froze. We've got a young female named Rose, Yellow Rose of Texas. That's a good name, right?
Apropos, yeah.
And we have a mutual friend that's hunting her right now. And when I had her, she was wanting to go her own way, but and that's not. I'm not a huge fan of that. But all of a sudden she got up there, and they turned out some live coons for her. Anyway, she's really turning the crank. Got a tremendous tree mouth.
Oh.
And then at home, I've got old Sally, she's a dual grand. She'll be 10 in next December. And then, like I said, the little pup is just a baby. And then we've got an older female that's about 11, dual grand champion. So that Tom does have that dog he calls Roller. That's very accomplished night hunt dog. High Roller is his name. But other than that, we're all females. You know, and
you're like Randy Smith. Up in Pennsylvania. He loves a female and won't hardly keep a male at all.
Well, the old adage is, and you know it, but if you've got a stud dog, you have to depend on the female public to come to you. If you got a female, all the stud dogs in the world
are available,
and particularly in this day of AI, it doesn't matter if you're on the other side of the country. You can still breed to them.
Absolutely. We've got this little plot dog, and of course, he's amazed us, really. He's not 3 yet, and he's made quadruple grand.
Yes.
But that's all on my partner, Mark. He set those goals, and I can remember those excruciatingly hot summer days, and he's driving 3 hours to some water race or field trial in Virginia just so he can get those degrees,
Right.
But there again, we were fortunate, right? About the time that he finished the quad grand thing, to get 3 females bred to him.
Yeah, good.
And they appear to be, pretty good females. One of them is a Nite champion. The other one is a very promising young dog. She's won some casts and stuff.
Right.
But the pedigrees look real good. So we've got 3 litters there. Don't have a clue how they're going to turn out.
Well, of course not. But
but they're pretty and that all that. But like you say, if you've got a good female. I used to, when I advertised the dog when I was at UKC, I called him Roper. And I bred quite a few plot females to him.
Right.
One being the boy from Oklahoma there, David Westbrook, with the Capital City Go Annie female.
Okay.
And she was a world show champion and a Grand Night, and won the Purina race for the
Yes.
pot, all that good stuff.
Yes.
But I would have guys call me off of my stud ad, and they'd say, "Do you have any puppies for sale?" No, I don't have any puppies. I don't have any females. I said, and they said, "Well, we want a pup." I said, "Go find you a good female. You can have a whole yard full of puppies."
Yes.
But they said, "Well, we don't know where one of them is. We don't know." So yeah, I always I vacillated. I would go and stretch it. All I wanted was a female.
Yeah.
And then something would turn my head, and then I'd be into the male routine. But I guess probably percentage-wise, I had more good male dogs down through the years.
Right.
But I think I worked harder with them.
Well, and that's possible. And, of course, the other thing is the male's available 365.
Oh, yeah.
And typical females in heat twice a year.
Yeah.
So that's a couple of months. But I guess, like I say, the greatest dog I ever followed was a female.
Yeah.
So I've always had that kind of, even though I have had some wonderful male dogs through the years, but I'll admittedly say that I am prejudiced towards the female dogs.
Well, I've told somebody, I was talking to them yesterday, I think, and this dog keeps coming up in my memory, and I don't know why. It might have been part of the whole experience. I was a West Virginia boy, mountain boy, hunting the creeks and the ridges. Went to West Texas to San Angelo, met up with the coon hunters there, and of course Robert Knox there at the commissary. On Goodfellow Air Force Base, treated me like a son. And started hunting with him and that old bugler boy dog he had.
Yep.
Now that dog impressed the heck out of me, and how he impressed me so much was he could take a bad track and move it.
Well, he was out of Swan's Rock, which was out of Shetler Sonny Boy and Bunker Hill Queen, and Bunker Hill Queen was out of Incredible Rock, one of the early world champions. And I didn't really know that much, but through the years I found out that Incredible Rock dog was also a cold nose. Walkers, it's a misnomer to say walkers are not cold nose because that may be true of certain strains, but the Sonny Boy, Finney River strains are the coldest nosed dogs I've ever been around in my life. And so he came by that cold nose heat bugle. Bugler came by.
Very impressive dog.
Yeah.
I loved his mouth, and I loved the way he would drift a track. You know, he'd strike. Well, I had something to measure him with, but it wasn't a very good measuring stick. But I brought a young plot dog out there, you know, or my dad shipped him to me, and wow. Crawley, Bugler would get those tracks up and running before Crawley could ever get a whiff, you know.
James, my old late dear friend James Higgins and I had
I wanted to talk about him. I'm glad you brought him up.
Well, we had he had, and I hunted her as much as he did, but her name was Fern, and she was directly out of Swan's Rock. Mm-hmm. Had a little old kind of just straight chop mouth, but she had a change at the tree. You could tell when she was treed. But I'm not exaggerating. You know, coon hunters can be called prone to this occasionally. With other good dogs, we've seen her run. If you didn't know her, you'd think she was running a rabbit, you know, because the other dogs weren't opening. And then she treed, had the coon.
Yeah.
They just couldn't smell it.
Yeah. Yeah. And those dogs will forevermore be the yardstick.
Yeah.
Or should be.
Yes.
I'm afraid a lot of the dogs nowadays, and we could move this over into the bear hunting arena too. But I wonder about how much nose we're breeding in these dogs now, because we're basically breeding these ambush type dogs that just get through the country and they get under a coon that you can score.
Yeah.
It's hot. They probably saw it scratching the bark going up. You know. And same thing with bear hunting, you know. Watch the videos on TV with guys like on YouTube with Kirk Price and the Untamed Boys and those guys, the bear hunters. You know, they're seeing some of these bear before they ever turn loose on them.
Yeah.
They were using game cameras to see when the baits have been hit. Mm-hmm. And so the dogs were really not having a cold trail. When I was a kid growing up bear hunting, if you didn't have a cold trail, you might as well stay at the house.
Right.
Because you were not going to, the chances of you getting on a hot bear track were about slim and none, you know.
Well, I think back to the coon hunting too, the raccoon, you know, I would put them along with white-tailed deer, with wild hogs, maybe a few other species, rather than recede in numbers with civilization's ongoing progress. They've gone the total opposite.
Yeah. Exactly.
And so there's, you know, there may be parts of the country that I'm not aware of that may not have that many. But everywhere I know, coons are everywhere.
Oh, they are.
I mean, they're in cities and they're just everywhere. And so
John Strickland stopping by. Good to see you, John.
So in answer to the need to cold trail, unless you're in some arid part of the West, you know, which is not as much coon hunting goes on there as the eastern half of the country. Hey, they're not having to they run 50 yards and they're already on a trail.
Exactly.
You know?
The boys from back home in West Virginia, where I grew up hunting, they tell me they're absolutely eat up with coons around there.
Yeah.
Well, we were paying, what was the guy, Brandstetter?
Gene Brandstetter.
At Brownwood, Texas.
Brownie's Coonhound.
We were paying him $20 a coon to haul 100 coons from Brownwood, Texas to Beckley, West Virginia, so we could turn them loose.
He sent a lot to eastern Tennessee, too, the more mountainous part of Tennessee back in the day, but I don't know. Most places that I have any awareness of, the raccoon population is more than it's ever been.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely. And good for them, you know. But back in the day, you know, you had to love the experience of coon hunting. And that's what I hope these young people are getting. This year we had several people that have stopped by, and really pleased to get to talk to this fellow that I haven't talked to actually. In what year was it that we met out in Montgomery City?
It was
Missouri.
1989.
1989. The voice you hear is Doug Crawley, and he's from the state of Illinois. And Doug has an entry in the Coonhound history books that will never be, his record will never be broken, because he owned and was successful in winning the UKC World Championship held at Montgomery City, Missouri, there at John Wick's business there, with a female. He was the first female winner of the UKC World Championship with a dog named Crawley's. I'm going to have trouble with that, Doug. Crawley's Louise.
Yes.
Doug Crawley. Doug, it's great to have you on my podcast.
It's great to be on here, Steve. Look forward to hearing you every time you guys come out. Just recently got back into it, and I love everything you guys are doing.
Well, I tell you what, it's I've kind of moved from being a competition hunter before I went to UKC, and then while I was there, I was involved up to my neck in competition hunts for so many years, and with the other registries. But and now I've kind of gotten into the armchair sport. I tell people now, Doug, I'm a cheerleader. Is what I'm like the grandpa at the Little League baseball game.
Yeah.
I'm out there cheering these younger bucks on.
Yeah, I know it. As the older we get, the tougher it seems to get up and go. So it's at times catching up with all of us, I suppose.
Well, I suppose so too. How old were you when you won the UKC World Hunt? Do you remember?
I think I was like 29 or 30, somewhere right around in there. Had one kid at home, and people sometimes question me about how you win a world hunt, and I said you got to train like you're going to the Olympics. I said it's a every night hunt, and I said you and your dog has got to be just like that. Best friends is what I told the guy here just a while back. I said you want that dog to do great. I said you make it your best friend. Haul it around in the truck, and I said you know everything about that dog, and that dog knows everything about you.
Preach it, brother.
Yep.
You know, I tell these hunters, new hunters, I get criticized for talking down to the young hunters, so I don't want to do that ever. But newer hunters and all that, you gotta know your dog.
You got to know it front ways, backwards, everywhere in between.
Now, if you can imagine, or the people that are listening to me, to us, no Garmin. Did we even have tracking collars back then?
There was no trash. When you trash trained the dog, you went and you grabbed that dog up, and you give it a little adjustment, and that's how you did it. Now I'll never forget, we had a barrel with a deer hide in it, and that when the dog run a off game, you went and you put that dog in there, and you twirled them around till they passed out, and then you went back in. You know what that taught my dog to do? Every time she bumped a deer, she knows she better go run and tree a coon, because she's going to get put in that barrel.
In that barrel. Well, our methods back then were probably not going to pass muster today with a lot of the people out there. No. We did what we had to do, didn't we? That's for sure.
And you never left your dog in the woods at night. You slept out there with them. I never, ever left a dog in the woods. If I couldn't catch that dog and it didn't come back to me, I slept there in the truck till it come in.
You did. Yeah. Well, I've stayed up all night, a lot of nights, waiting for a dog to come in.
Now you look at the little map, and you know right where your dog's at all the time. You go and get him, and
that's why they don't home me anymore. They don't come back where you turn them loose.
That's
usually.
Right.
Yeah. Oh man, it sure has changed. Well, let's a little bit of background with you. You're from the state of Illinois. You said about an hour south of Chicago.
Correct. Yep.
What town?
A little town called Rossville, Illinois. Really, I live in Alvin. I got a Rossville address. I tell everybody Alvin, Illinois is probably like 200 people maybe, and I tell everybody I live in the suburbs.
The suburbs. There you go. You're out there, and you told me you have like a construction business.
Yeah, I do. I got heavy equipment, and I do dirt work. I specialize in doing waterways and such.
Oh, awesome. Everybody's a specialist nowadays, right?
Well, I used not have to have no problem getting that kind of work, but now everybody and their brother, every farmer's got a piece of equipment, and if you don't get specialized into something, then you don't get much work.
Yeah. They sell a lot of tractors. I often wonder, I go by tractor dealerships down in Florida, and they've got them wall to wall.
How big are they going to get? I mean, they're so big now they can't go down the road.
I know. They got all these wheels and lasers and all that stuff.
And that high dollar stuff, too. I don't know how they afford it.
Well, I heard one time years ago it said most farmers went bankrupt because of green tractors and blue silos.
That's probably true.
Well, Doug, let's go back to, and then we'll kind of come to forward here. You said that was at 89?
89, yeah.
89, okay. Set the stage on this. I had been at UKC full-time as a manager from 83. So that was probably the sixth world hunt that we had. I can remember that we went, to out to Montgomery City.
Right.
Of course, everybody knew John Wick at that time. And his products were flying out the door.
Yes.
And,
he wrote a couple books, didn't he?
A couple books, he did. In fact, those things are now, out of print and hard to find.
Is that right?
And they're bringing phenomenal prices
I think
on
I still
eBay
got them
and
somewhere.
Stuff. Better hang on to them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. You, back in those days, if I recall correctly, we had a 4-night world hunt. It started on a Wednesday night, and then it ultimately got down to the Final Four on Saturday night. We had a qualifying system.
Right.
Where did you qualify, Louise? Do you remember?
I qualified her in Wisconsin at a club up there, and it was kind of a strange deal because I know that if you won your cast, you was automatically qualified. The Master Hounds never called my name. And so I went home, and back then we didn't have cell phones. You had a telephone, and he'd been trying to call me and tell me that I was qualified for the hunt. And on the very last day that I could send my qualification in, he got a hold of me, and he says, "You're qualified for the world hunt." And he goes, "I'll express your entry fee in this if you want to go." And I said, "Yes, I want to go." I said, "That's what I drove to Wisconsin for to get qualified."
Oh, sure. How about that? Well, it seems like that's coming back in bits and pieces because that's been several years, as we know. But I remember the hunt well. I don't remember all the details, and I'm sure you probably will. Has that memory kind of been alive with you through all these years?
Yeah, I don't remember everything that happened, but I remember quite a bit of it. I remember it was Hurricane Hugo come through that weekend.
Right.
And it was tough hunting conditions because of the wind. It wasn't a whole lot of rain and such, but it was a whole lot of wind. And it made it tough hunting conditions because you couldn't hear your dog.
Yeah. That hunting out there, I wouldn't describe it as being, at that time, having a lot of coon, was it?
Right.
It wasn't real easy hunting.
No, it wasn't easy, but that dog could run an old burger track and get it up and get it treed, and never, ever, hardly. And the guys argue with me this because they asked how accurate she was. And I said, she's probably 95% accurate. I said, she won't treat unless there's a coon on the outside. And I said, you can tell when she's sitting there looking at it or if she's got it. Because if she's looking at it, there's no getting her off of it.
Yeah. How old was she when she won the world hunt?
3 years old, I think.
Doug, we're going to have a lot of competition. Let's take a break, and when they get through with this auction, let's finish this.
Okay.
You want to?
Yeah, great.
Okay.
Thanks. Yep.
I am here still with Doug Crawley. Doug, as we mentioned, was the owner and successful winner of the UKC World Hunt back in 1989 with a dog called Crawley's Louise, and we were talking about the hunt. And in our little brief interlude there, Doug and I have sorted out that we did indeed have the zone system in place back then. And I believe you told me, Doug, you went up to Elkhorn, Wisconsin.
Yep,
for that.
Elkhorn, Wisconsin. Yep. was just right across the line for me up in about 30 miles up into Wisconsin.
Yeah, there was a guy named Eric Froming that was with that club up there, and I worked there. Now, I don't know if you remember or not whether I was there for that zone hunt. I know the first year we had the zones would have been 88, and that year I did work on behalf of UKC at the Elkhorn Zone.
Did you?
But
Yep.
I don't know if I did that 2 years in a row. I don't remember.
I don't remember it either.
Pretty good hunting up in that area.
Oh, it was great hunting, but it was like swamps with low-lying areas, and sometimes you didn't want to get into the swamp because there was quicksand in there. I remember the guy telling me that. And I remember somebody coming out and shining the light around. I said, they're out there road hunting. He goes, no. He goes, in Wisconsin, you can do that. He goes, you can shine your lights around at night and look at the deer. I said, well, that's the craziest thing I ever seen.
We had that in Michigan, too. They had a shining season. It was like 2 weeks before the actual deer season or something when it closed. But, yeah, we'd be out coon hunting, and here's somebody pulls up on the road and shining around, and anyway, let's talk just a minute before we get into that. I know those many years. What'd you say? We figured out 35?
35 years since I've laid eyes on you in person.
And who do you run into here at Automox out of all these people, right?
Yeah.
Well, when you came up to me and you said something to the effect that you bet I didn't remember you or what, I had to be honest, I didn't. But now I do, But, well, let's talk about Louise a little bit. What type of, where'd you get her? How'd you start with her?
My brother gave her to me. We went to Kentucky, and he was going to give me this dog, and I knowed absolutely nothing about coon hunting, and I didn't have a dog collar, and I didn't have a leash or nothing, and a dog box.
Really?
And we had a spare tire in the back of the truck, and I chained her with a dog chain to that spare tire, and we drug her all the way back up there from Kentucky.
Oh, boy.
And the guy that was going to be in partners with me, he let her run on the farm. And I remember one day going out there, and she's laying asleep out in the middle of the road. And I go up there, and I go, you're going to have to do something with that dog. I said, she's going to get run over. She's laying out there in the middle of the road. She said, oh, she'll be all right. Well, the next time I come up and I seen that, I just got her, and I took her home with me and took over full ownership of her. He didn't really want nothing to do with her at that time anyway. And started hunting her. It was slow at first, and
How old was she at that point, you think?
probably a year and a half old, would have been 18 months old. And green, she'd run loose on the farm her whole life, and she run everything. My brother, I took her back down there one time so he could hunt her a little bit to see. She run deer. And he goes, she can run a deer and pull the hair out of its butt, he said. I said, man, oh, man. But, we finally got her broke off of that. And we went through everything that you go through with a coon dog, running foxes. And I remember running a skunk one time. And she come to me, and she was just as sick as could be. And I couldn't put a lead on her because, you couldn't even get close to her.
Yeah.
She followed, the only time she ever did that, followed about 10 foot behind me, jumped up in the truck, stayed in the doghouse for about a month until it finally wore off.
Wow. Yeah. So she was kind of a natural then in her, she just picked it up.
As natural as could be.
Were you taking her out several times a week or?
I went up before the hunt was there. I'd hunted for 2 years probably, religiously, 4 or 5 nights a week. And I know what it took before I went to a hunt to make her so she jumped 2 foot in the air, when you unleashed her. If you'd go out early in the week and hunt her and then lay her up for 4 or 5 days and then bring her in there, I mean, she would be on fire. There's no dog going to outrun her.
I got you. So she'd get in there. She covered ground pretty quick.
Yep.
Did she open much on track?
She's a first strike dog, and she didn't put a lot in the track. And she'd bark once here, bark once over yonder, bark another time up yonder, and then fall treat on you.
Yeah. What we call a drifting track dog.
Right.
She'd keep moving ahead. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Do you remember her background?
Yeah, she was bred out of Hickory Nut Harry and out of Gaines Finisher dog.
Okay.
And the Gaines Finisher really showed in it because she could finish any track. I mean, I've seen her, this is no kidding, come up on a track that I know was made early at night, you know, and then it'd be late in the morning, and you could just tell by the way she's running the track because she just kind of boo-hoos around on it and get it up and get it running and tree it, you know.
Yeah. How did she work with the other dogs? Did she try to get away from them? Did she pretty much work with them, or just immaterial?
She worked with any dog. It didn't matter if they's mean or whatever. If they's mean, she'd sit back off the tree and just sit there and hammer it. And, you know, she'd get up on a tree, too, if there was room up there for her. But absolutely, when she got hooked, you had to go get her.
Yeah.
I remember one night we was hunting in the woods, and she treed out in the middle of a huge cornfield, which we have them in Illinois. I mean, 600-acre plot, and I was 4 hours before I got to her. And when I got to her, it was in about a 30-foot tree. You could see the coon. It was a moonlit night, and she was just sitting there looking at it, just howling, you know, just on top of it.
Yeah. That's great, man. Well, you know, and we talked about this before, I think you and I did, but I have with others here. You know, the dogs back in that day that made it to that level, they were coon dogs. And I'm not saying that ones today aren't. I'm not saying that at all.
Right.
But there was no doubt that these dogs were dogs that, you know, deserved what
they was
got.
man-made. They wasn't electronic made with a shock and collar and all that. You had a dog and you went out there and you physically hunted it. It wasn't nothing, you know. And you stayed with it all the time. There was no going off and leave. There was no tracking or no training or nothing back then.
What was your impression of the UKC World Hunt in that day, 1989? As far as, you know, you go there, you go to Montgomery City, you get there, and the first thing you do is you have to go confirm your entry with the field reps, and you go through all that process and all. Did that? It
was a very well organized event. It was, you know, I'd never been to a world hunt before, so it was all new and strange to me. But it was very well put on, and the activities when you went there was. There was hardly any time to sleep. I mean, you hunted until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. You slept 2 hours, and you had to get up and do pictures and you know, go to your different, I was in the Treeing Walker and Breeders Hunters Fest, and they wanted pictures, you know, and it was just a constant for. I think it was 4 days. It's just maybe I got 8 hours of sleep in 4 days.
Well, I'm glad to know that the UKC staff, weren't the only ones that were staying up late.
Yeah.
Oh, those were the days. Those were the days that I remember when I talk about the golden age of coon hunting. To me, it was in those years, those 80s, 90s, up to mid-90s. Entries were large. You know, you had guys that were just hot.
Yep.
We've got a lot of registries involved in the sport. We've got a lot of events all over the country. The number of coon hunters overall has declined. The entries at the events, things like the regional qualifying events, don't draw nearly as many dogs as they used to. But the numbers of the dogs in the finals that, you know, that go to the World Hunt have remained fairly constant.
Yep.
So it's just kind of like a different dynamic, you know, there. But for a guy that, you know, has got a dog, you haven't been coon hunting that long, you get this dog from your brother, then you just start hunting. You had an inherent knowledge of how to do this thing without probably really even knowing it.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, you just don't do that.
And I remember your demeanor at the World Hunt back then as being very low key.
Yep.
Excuse me for saying so, just seemed like a country boy that brought his dog to a hunt.
Yeah.
And every time we started calling names, your name kept coming up.
Yep.
And guys are saying, what about this female? What about this Louise dog,
Yeah.
I don't remember the dogs. I'm going to have to go back and do some research as to the dogs that were in your Final Four. We discussed the dog out of Michigan, I know, that did well that year, the Pulpwood dog, Bombach's Pulpwood.
Yep.
And Jim Bombach there from Michigan. And I hunted with Jim and with Pulpwood. And he was a nice hound and all, but I don't remember the others. You mentioned earlier that Russ Beller and you exchanged, had a conversation. I remember back in those days, Russ was just about always up there in the Final Four or Final Eight or whatever.
Yeah.
And I don't
Who was
remember.
his co-conspirator? I can't remember.
At that time, it was probably Randall Myers.
Randall Miles from Tennessee.
Yeah. Now, were they hunting the Tom dog at that time, or was Russ hunting Pac-Man?
I think it was the Tom dog. I think they retired Pac-Man.
Okay. Pac-Man won it back in '86 at Marion, Indiana. And then '87 was the year Tom was in the final cast and Pac-Man was too. And that was the year we didn't have a winner. We didn't have any plus points in the final cast.
Wow.
And a dog named Giles Joe, or later Everman's Joe, there was a controversy about the dog and his name and all that stuff. But he was given the first place at the World Hunt, but he didn't get the title.
Wow.
So that was the only year that they didn't have a world champion.
Right.
And that was in 1987 in Logansport. So a couple years after that, then here we go to Montgomery City. And what do you remember? Can you remember anything about the final cast?
Not really. It was. I remember some of the cast prior to that, like the first night that we hunted in a 4-dog cast, and it seemed like there was a blue tick and an English dog and 2 Walker dogs, and I distinctly remember Louise treeing by herself, and the other 3 dogs was treed in a separate tree. So we split the cast, and we went to my tree, and they went to their tree. When we get to the tree, all the dogs are together. I took minus because they said my dog moved, and I know she didn't because I could hear her treat, and we walked right straight to her, right where she was at. But there was nothing I could say because the majority of the cast out rules, and I thought, well, I'm 175 in the hole. I hope I got some dog power to get by this, and sure enough, I did. I ended up,
Yeah, we just had a dog run through the arena, and out the door he went. He's gone hunting, and there goes a guy with a leash right behind and an empty collar.
Yeah. Oops.
Oops, got an escapee out here. Well, now, actually, with using non-hunting judges, that judge should have made the call for you. It didn't matter whether the cast voted on it or not.
Right.
It didn't. Of course, if you take a question back, and they poll the cast and all, it might weigh against you somehow. But they should, in that case, should be going with the word of the. And I've told people this so many times over the years. That's the oldest trick in the book in night hunting. It's saying the dogs are split and mine moved to yours.
Right.
That's been played for many, many years. But I think the judge is a little sharper than that now.
Yeah.
I don't remember who those judges were.
I don't remember
they
either.
They were probably selected by John Wick. I think he had his friend from out in Pennsylvania, may have been out there, and I can't remember his John Ross. I think he may have been one of the judges. That cast, I don't know. I shouldn't even comment on that because I absolutely don't know. But anyway, so you took a minus, but you ended up winning a cast anyway.
Yep, I distinctly remember taking 175 plus or minus. They said my dog moved, and then we went on, and I think one of the dogs in the cast treed a possum, and then it got scratched, and then a couple. I think I ended up treeing 2 more coons, and then coming back, with enough plus points to win the cast.
Yeah. Well, that's always been the way. I mean, you keep you win your cast, you keep advancing, you know. But we did have a provision in there. I think they've corrected that now and all. That depending on the number of dogs we had, when they had to go back out and hunt a late round just to determine the fourth dog, sometimes a dog that had not really been defeated and all ended up not getting in the final four, which that really shouldn't be. You know, it was based on score. So, but things have kind of evolved in the night hunt game now, and I think we had a lot to do with that, going to AKC and devising this cast win. Only we used to say, beat the dogs you draw, that's all. Because back in the day of Louise and all, if you won, when she made was she a night champion at the time she won?
She was a grand night champion, but she was a night champion because I'd never received my paperwork yet to make her grand night champion. So actually, she was entered as a night champion.
Yeah, but she had already finished.
Yeah, I'd already finished her. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's been these changes, corrections, things have been done, you know, over the years to. As it should be,
right?
You know. Did you ever breed her? I think you did.
I bred her several times,
yeah,
and never really got no pups out of her. I had one pup that was out of Lone Pine breeding, you know, and he was really doing great. And I turned him out one day just to let him out while I fed him, and he ran across the road and got run over by a car. Yeah. And it was just sickening.
Sure.
And there was another litter mate to him that was doing real good, and the guy was out hunting him, and the guy shot him. So that was just the end of it. You know, it was bad luck all the way around.
Yeah.
Louise had a litter mate that I bought. I paid $1,000 for. I had to go to the bank and borrow the money, which was a lot of money back in 1989. It would have been in the a little bit earlier than that. Anyway. She died 3 weeks later in the kennel.
Oh my goodness!
I just went out there to feed her, and there she was.
You did have
dead.
a lot of hard luck.
Oh, it was just one thing after another. It was just constant, you know. But that's the way it is.
You still have that trophy?
I still got all of them. They're right in my living room. Yeah.
Awesome. You're not old enough to have grandkids yet, are you?
I got grandkids. Got 5 grandkids.
Have you ever told them the story of winning the world hunt?
We get the book out every once in a while. They don't really comprehend it, you know, too much yet. I guess I'm on TikTok.
Oh, are you?
You know, my son just posted a thing there saying, "You're TikTok famous, Dad. Looky there." And it was a picture of me and Dean Rainwater on the cover of the UKC when we won the World Hunt.
How about that? Dean Rainwater. Well, that's a name, you know, that was he your backup handler?
Yeah, he was my backup handler. He was a longtime friend, and I would have never competition hunted if it wasn't for him, because he's the one that kept pushing me. He goes, "You got a good dog there." He goes, "You need to go competition hunt it." And so I started.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, it was a big story back in those days. Now, you mentioned something that I said in an article or whatever in Coonhound Bloodlines. What was that we were talking about before?
You wrote a piece of scripture in there from the Bible that said the last shall be first, because of the circumstances, even how I showed up there with the qualifier, you know, not getting notified, and it was a last minute deal to get qualified, or I was qualified but I didn't know it, and it was a last minute deal for me to get in there, you know.
Well, it was meant to be.
Yeah, I guess it was.
It was, absolutely. Well, you know, it's kind of like a friend. There was a coon hunter. I think he's passed now, but he's very famous in Major League Baseball. He lived in North Carolina. His name was Tony Cloninger. Tony, most people got to know Tony when he bought a dog named Crow and Grant's Cutter, the Cutter dog. Tony has a record in Major League Baseball that I believe will never be broken.
Really?
He was a pitcher, and a good one. He had a couple of years there. He had a 20-game year. He had maybe a 19-game year. But he was playing for the Braves when they were Milwaukee, and they were playing in Candlestick Park in San Francisco, and Tony did not hit one Grand Slam home run. He hit 2 Grand Slams in one game.
Wow.
And I figured that record will never be broken as a pitcher. Now, Crawley's Louise will never be dethroned as the first female to ever win the UKC World Hunt. That is something.
It just blows my mind. It seems like a dream, to be truthfully honest with you. The whole thing does, you know?
Yeah. Well, 35 years later, here we are sitting. Who would have thunk it, right?
Right.
Who would have thought I'd be 77 years old? I can't wrap my mind around that, you know. But, man, it's been delightful to talk to you.
Hey, it's been great, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Yep. And have you been coming to Autumn Oaks recently?
I haven't been over here in a long time. We come over every year after that for, I don't even remember how many years, but it's been a while, so I come over, and I wanted to come over and check it out again.
Yeah,
and get some dog supplies. I needed some stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's a supermarket out there.
Yes, it is. There was great deals on stuff out there.
Yeah. I mean, that's what people, I think they realize that.
Yeah.
That, you know, they can come here. And I think some of them kind of hold back to Saturday thinking, you guys will mark it down a little bit and stuff.
Right.
Some of the things are on a, manufacturer's retail price deal, but yeah, Autumn Oaks is a big it's like you bring the whole supply world here to one location.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there.
Everything here, you know.
And great deals on stuff. I bought a pair of boots for $100, and they're all that stuff is expensive to buy it and get it shipped to you now. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, there's nothing like it. They call it, and I have to brag a little bit. I named it the event where history's made, and there's been a lot of history through here, all these years. Is. Yeah.
Our Coon Club just recently closed a couple years ago, but it had been in the same spot since like 1959.
Wow.
And there was a lot of people that, you remember Art Hunziger that showed Black and Tans?
Sure.
His pictures was on the wall in there where he used to come over there and show dogs and stuff. I mean, there was a lot of them that come through there.
Remember Art very well. Well, I hear Alan Gingrich on the PA system. They're getting ready to call these dogs out for tonight. Doug, it's great to see you. Great to be with you. And thanks for
really great to see you,
today.
Steve. And maybe next year I'll stop and talk to you
Do
again.
it. Absolutely, brother.
Thank you.
Have a good time.
Yep.